Okay, so let's get started. The first thing I want to do is talk about the compute resources you're going to need. You don't need any hefty rig. This can run on your local desktop. It can run on your laptop. You can run it on a remote type system, which is what I'm doing. I have an old Intel NUC sitting in the corner of my office. It's got about 16 gigs of RAM. You don't need that much. Maybe even 6 or 8 gigs is probably fine. Um, you can see here. Well, I got a lot tied up in cache, but you don't need a whole lot to run all this. Depends upon your needs. This is Ubuntu 20, I think. Probably need to upgrade. I already have Docker installed, and it's running on my system. The Docker daemon is I have Docker Compose installed because we're going to use Docker Compose for this, mostly so I can toggle my services on and off. I use profiles for most of the components. That way I can turn on the components that I need. I can turn the whole thing off if I need to. I can turn the whole thing on if I need to, and so on and so forth. And I want to make it very portable. Um, so yeah, let's go ahead and get into this. You see I'm in a directory here. I'm going to start from scratch just so you can see what we got. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create that and .env. That's where I'll keep all my secrets and so forth. We're going to scaffold some directories real quick. So we have one for Gitea. You can use named volumes if you really want to for this. I like bind mounts. That way I can inspect the data. I can manipulate the data if I need to. It's whatever you want. I don't like having to keep going into varlib docker if I don't have to. So we have Gitea, coder, act, which is for our CI/CD Gitea actions. We're going to have one for OpenGist, proxpy, registry, and SonarQube. I think that's good enough for now. Yeah, that's probably good. So I'll go into our compose file. Instead of typing this out line by line, I'll copy and paste and just talk through the code blocks. I'm going to give this a name. That way all of my networks and my containers are all prefixed. That way I don't have any clashes or anything. So we're going to call this dev env for dev environment. You can call it whatever you want to. And we're going to set up networks. Just that way it creates a network and I'll attach everything onto it. By doing it this way, by giving it a network, they can all communicate with each other, they can see each other, and they can DNS resolve each other, which will work with the interplay that we're going to do. Because we're going to have Gitea sort of be our core component. It's going to also serve as our authentication provider. So all the other systems, if they offer like an SSO, the Gitea will do that on our behalf. So from here, I'll start defining my services. And like I said, if you see me keep looking over to the side, I got my reference environment, the one I use day to day, sitting off to the side, and I'm just going to recreate it over here for the video. Okay, so this is my configuration for running my Gitea installation. So I'm pulling Gitea, the latest. You can pin the version if you want to. It's probably a good idea. That's what I just happen to have up there. The host name is going to be Gitea. I'm going to put it on my dev environment network. I'm going to mount 3 volumes. This is our local Gitea directory. We're going to keep all of our data, and we're going to provide time zone and local time data through a read-only bind mount. We're going to publish on port 8000. I'm going to pick different ports throughout all this. That way they don't step on each other as much as I can. A quick note about accessing all these services. You could certainly put a proxy to put all these services behind. That way you can access them from one specific URL and a port, or you can give them all different names and do what I do, which is just to put all the different names into your Linux host file or your Windows host file. That way they know to all access them from the same place, and then the ports will sort out which service you're accessing. We're going to pass some environment variables here, user ID, UID, and GID. These correspond to my user on the system. Gitea custom just says where my data is going to live, and this is how I override the default port. I don't remember what it is, probably 80 or 443 or something. I tell it I want to run it on port 8000. My restart policy, I'm going to put unless stopped. If you're going to use this all the time, probably put always instead of unless stopped. I'm going to turn this on and off different times of the day, and as the case may be, to save some power or to make this rig portable. So if the service crashes and restarts, I want it, or the system maybe even reboots, it will bring it back up. But if I manually stop it, I don't want it coming back up. So I'll put that there. It defines a health check. I need a health check on this because I've got some dependent services that are going to come later that need to make sure not only is the container started, but that it also has that the actual application is up and running. So we basically curl this endpoint in the API, and that'll tell us if the service is actually healthy. So we define some sane parameters for start period, interval, and timeout and retries. And honestly, that's all we really need to get Gitea working. It's really simple to install once you kind of have a config in mind. So we're going to save that out. I don't remember if I talked about this. When we do the dependent services later, I'll add profiles to them inside Compose. That way I can toggle them on and off. So, something like Docker Compose profile, let's say open gist, something like that, up-d. And that way I can use these different profiles, and I can do multiples, or I can make aggregate profiles, profile, or something like that. I can do whatever I want to. I don't add one of those to Gitea because I always want to start it and stop it every time since it's a core component. I don't remember if I already said this, but. And the other thing, if you see me do this, I have a local alias for Docker Compose, just DCO. So I can just do Docker Compose. We don't have to type it out every time. So DCO up -D. That's all I really have to do to start it up. And you can see it's created my new network and it's launched Gitea. So DCO logs -f Gitea. And you always want to invoke Docker Compose logs and things like that. That way you don't have to append the prefix every time. And I can see it's running and it started the server. So let's go see what we see. And there we go. It's the initial configuration. If you're going to be using this for a lot of development, you may want to do a remote database. I'm lazy in this case, so I'm just going to use SQLite. It's not very good production grade, but for personal use, it's okay. So I'm going to leave it SQLite 3 for my database. I'm not going to touch any of this stuff here. You can turn on an update checker if you want to. If you want to get real emails, certainly you can plug in an SMTP host, maybe something like Gmail or whatever, and make an app password, and you can actually get real emails. I'm not going to fool with it. Only thing I'm going to change here on my third-party services is I'm going to disable self-registration. I don't want people registering for this. I just want it for users that are already created. Not that it really matters for a private installation, but I don't mean for this to be public. So hidden email domain, I'm just going to use something like example.com. Nothing crazy. I'll use that throughout all these videos. You should probably put whatever if you have a custom domain, plug that in for sure. Administrator account settings, I'm going to do here, and I don't know, maybe I'll do Daniel, or sorry, I'll do something like, Daniel.queen@example, something like that, and give it a password. And so that way I don't have to have an admin user, then create my user. That's probably a better practice, but the first user will be my user, and it'll be the admin user. Saves me a few steps later. Once we install, it shouldn't take but a few seconds to do what it needs to do. And there we go. Honestly, like pretty quick to get this up and running. I like to do a couple sane things like switch this to dark mode. And then you can do all kinds of other stuff. Upload yourself a custom avatar so you don't have to look at this generated avatar. Whatever you want to do, you can start configuring it to however you want to do it. But yeah, you can create an organization if you want to actually have like groups or projects together. You can create repositories. I mean, everything you can normally do, you can do it right now. So we'll do, test repo. And you can create your files from here, or, do it right here. Go to temp real quick and git clone. What is it? Yeah, so I can get config. You probably should do global, but local user.name. Say that. Yeah. Oh. There we go. Something like that. So let's do readme, and then maybe I git ignore. Okay. Something like that. It's on master branch. It doesn't matter what what you call your default branch. Gitea does main as its default one, so whatever you want to do. Here, I'll just put in my user and pass. You probably ought to set up an authentication provider or a key to do that, but for the purposes of testing it, this is just fine. So I've got source code management and everything that goes with it. As of the most recent Gitea installations, actions is already enabled for all the repositories. If for some reason you want to disable it, you know, you can turn it off here. Of course, you can turn off releases, packages, and whatever features you don't need, you can certainly do that. But for the moment, this is a real easy way to do it. And on my local system, I'm able to go to Gitea port 8000 because, like I said, I have an entry in my Windows host file. If you don't know how to do that, you just go to an administrator command prompt. It's under system32 drivers etc hosts and put it in there. So, anyways, you can play around with this and you can use this for all your source code management needs, and it works really well. So in the next video, we're going to move on to our remote development environment, which is where we really start getting really useful in this setup. So I'll see you then.